Thank you for joining us today. The 2024 special meeting of stockholders for Created will begin momentarily. I'd first like to introduce Chelsea Polano, who is acting as Created's corporate secretary for today's meeting.
Good afternoon, and thank you to all who have joined us today. I'd like to start off by taking care of a few technical matters to make sure that we're conducting a duly authorized meeting. Please be advised as well that the company has designated John Bonomo to serve as the Inspector of Election. The oath signed by the Inspector of Election will be filed with the minutes of the meeting. At the end of this meeting, we'll have a question and answer period. Throughout the meeting, if you have a question that you want to submit, you can enter it into the chat feature in Zoom, and it'll be sent to our hosts and panel. If there are any stockholders present who have not yet voted on the proposals under consideration today or would like to change their proxy vote, please do so now by returning to the link where you joined this meeting, annualgeneralmeetings.com/createdsp2024, clicking on vote and using the control number that was provided to you. We will pause briefly to give you a final chance to submit your ballot, at which point the polls will be closed and the preliminary results tabulated. Final results will be reported in a press release to be filed within 4 business days. During this time, our CEO and Chairman, Jeremy Fromer, will address you as well.
Thank you, Chelsea. Today's remarks will be recorded and transcribed for people who are not able to make the meeting today. Yesterday, Created announced a strategic stock swap with Hollywood Entertainment. I'm going to take a few minutes and explain why that is so important. Every day, I encounter skepticism about the future of the OTC market, particularly for micro and nano cap stocks. And it is undeniable that we've had a rough few years. Many companies have been caught in a vicious cycle initiated by the liquidity surge during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I have faced these battles firsthand and understand the pessimism that has overwhelmed many. But I refuse to be a casualty in this battle that I certainly didn't ask for. But no kidding, it is a war and it threatens my investors, many of which are my family, my friends. It threatens my 30-year career. And the public markets are a rigged system. Like much of the rest of the world, they're governed by power structures. Yet, irrespective, I remain steadfast in my belief in pursuing the American entrepreneurial dream. In the microcap space today, most companies are trading at historic lows, giving the impression that most are on the brink of failure. And while it is true that many are, this bleak outlook overlooks rare opportunities for those astute enough to act and seize the moment. And this requires a whole new methodology of thinking and working together as companies and as leaders. My personal involvement in CO Block and its parent company, Fuse Investments, are part of a broader plan to unite companies, create strategies, and advocate for constructive change at the regulatory level. And over the last year and a half, we've seen interesting progress on multiple fronts, with global regulators and even former President Trump engaging in a dialogue about naked short selling and the abuses that small companies suffer. Though clearly overvalued, DJT has definitely been whipped around, and I understand where he's coming from. To win this war, we must work together. And so we introduced internally a very important initiative at our company. We refer to it as Project 100. Now, our goal is to forge a powerful network driven by strategic and financial collaboration to rejuvenate the microcap market. In the first phase, we focused only on the OTC pink sheet specifically, only on a particular group within that pink sheets. And it was an ambitious initiative from the start. We started with 7,000 companies and broke it down to the 100 most interesting and opportunistic companies for us to look at. Future phases will include that analysis for the OTCQB and the OTCQX. The deep dive that determined the best investments statistically weighted against the data to ensure the highest probability for success on all. Some may work, some may not, but they are all good trades. Strategic and financial collaboration through these kind of mechanisms like stock swapping, corporate securities exchanges, M&A transactions, they can enhance net equity and they really bolster market position. They strengthen balance sheets and they counter short selling and they create unprecedented value for investors done correctly. Additionally, this approach creates an opportunity to generate value for shareholders by distributing some of the new company's stock as special dividends to created shareholders. And similarly, the partnership companies distribute created stock if they choose to their shareholders, thereby expanding both shareholder bases. During periods of high liquidity, capital flows more freely into riskier assets, driving up valuations. And conversely, when liquidity contracts, investors become more risk averse, leading to the kind of sharp declines we've seen in this space. And just like in society, contraction of capital leads to destruction of value and prosperity, but it also leads to survival of the fittest. The ability manifested itself in our most recent quarterly numbers, and it ultimately leads to a new era where only a few push on through to the other side here. For many companies, survival and growth hinge on strategic and financial connectivity, connections to one another. By fostering collaboration, companies can share resources such as technology, expertise, and infrastructure to reduce costs and enhance efficiency, run more effectively. Collective bargaining can significantly lower legal, accounting, and audit expenses, enabling companies to secure more favorable pricing structures together that they could individually. Key to survival in this overinflated era, because I still remember when a Q only cost $9,000, and that was just 3 or 4 years ago. Joint ventures in research, development, or market expansion can spur innovation and competitiveness. Our initiative aims to establish a company that efficiently and economically manages back office requirements at scale for the select group of publicly traded companies. Project 100 helps deter manipulative short selling tactics as well, as short sellers face a much more complex and risky environment when companies are financially linked. Hollywall Entertainment is the first public entity for us to engage on a transactional level like this. The partnership expects to leverage Hollywall's extensive content and IP library, particularly in the music industry, and Created's expertise in AI, archiving, community building, and other aspects that are complementary to Hollywall's incredible IP. And I want to thank Roxana Green, CEO of Hollywall, for her vision and hand in partnership as the first completed project from Project 100. The microcap market is rife with challenges, but also holds significant opportunities for those willing to adopt innovative strategies. By systematically filtering potential investments and fostering strategic and financial collaboration, microcap companies can and will enhance their net equity. They will mitigate risk, and they will, through cross-holding arbitrage, achieve sustainable growth again. This interconnected approach revitalizes individual companies and strengthens the weakened foundation of the microcap ecosystem, paving the way for a more resilient and dynamic market. In our next phase, I will reach out independently to each member on the Project 100 list to talk actively about how we can pursue this strategy together. And with that said, I will now hand it back to Chelsea. Afterwards, I look forward to engaging in a brief Q&A.
Thanks, Jeremy. Online voting is now closed. Before we report on the results, as corporate secretary of this meeting, I'll now report as to the delivery of the notice of the meeting, proxy statement and proxy card, and our annual report. An affidavit has been filed by our stock transfer agent stating that the notice of the meeting has been furnished to all shareholders of record as of July 1st, 2024, which is the date fixed by the board of directors as the record date of this meeting. The affidavit of mailing will be filed with the minutes of this meeting, and the list of stockholders of record is available for inspection. I will now ask the Inspector of Election to report as to the existence of a quorum.
Represented at this meeting, either present or by proxy, are holders of 2,797,172 shares of common stock, of a total of 2,960,740 shares issued and outstanding entitled to vote at the meeting. There is therefore a quorum present, and the meeting is competent to transact business.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to the voting results. The first proposal was to approve an amendment to the company's articles of incorporation to increase the number of shares of common stock authorized. The inspection of election will now report the results.
2,161,094 shares of common stock have been voted in favor of approval of the amendment. 132,159 shares of common stock have been voted against the approval, and 529 shares of common stock have abstained from voting on this proposal.
The results reported by the Inspector of Election indicate that the first proposal has been approved. The second proposal was for the approval of an amendment to the company's articles of incorporation to effect a potential future reverse stock split. The Inspector of Election will now report the results.
2,165,739 shares of common stock have been voted in favor of approval of the amendment. 127,525 shares of common stock have been voted against approval, and 519 shares of common stock have abstained from voting on this proposal.
The results indicate that the second proposal has been approved. The third proposal was for the approval of the company's 2024 Equity and Incentive Plan. The Inspector of Election will now report on the results.
Voting results for the third proposal were as follows. 2,022,145 shares of common stock were voted in favor of approval of the proposed amendment. 26,644 shares of common stock were voted against approval, and 1,703 shares of common stock were abstained from voting on this proposal.
The results reported indicate that the third proposal has been approved. The fourth proposal was for the approval of the company's 2024 subsidiary equity grants. The Inspector of Election will report the voting results.
The voting results for the fourth proposal were as follows. 2,023,306 shares of common stock were voted in favor of approval. 25,515 shares of common stock were voted against approval, and 1,671 shares of common stock were abstained from voting on this proposal.
The report of the Inspector of Election indicates that this fourth proposal has been approved. The fifth proposal was for a ratification of Astra Audit and Advisory, LLC, as the company's independent registered accountant.
The voting results for this proposal were as follows. 2,243,336 shares of common stock were voted in favor of approval. 49,826 shares of common stock were voted against approval, and 621 shares of common stock were abstained from voting on this proposal.
The results reported by the Inspector of Election indicate that this fifth proposal has been approved. The sixth proposal was to approve the sale of the company's subsidiary, CEO Block LLC. The Inspector of Election will report the voting results.
Voting results for the sixth proposal were as follows. 2,043,204 shares of common stock were voted in favor of approval. 6,740 shares of common stock were voted against approval, and 548 shares of common stock were abstained from voting on this proposal.
The results reported by the Inspector of Election indicate that the sixth proposal has been approved. The seventh proposal was for the approval of a potential future strategic partial or full spinoff or sale of the company's subsidiary Vocal Inc. The Inspector of Election will report the voting results.
The voting results for the seventh proposal were as follows. 2,044,988 shares of common stock were voted in favor of the proposal. 4,974 shares of common stock were voted against the proposal, and 530 shares of common stock were abstained from voting.
The report indicates that the seventh proposal has been approved. The eighth and final proposal was for the approval of a potential future strategic partial or full spinoff or sale of the company's subsidiary OG Collection Inc. The Inspector of Election will report the results.
The voting results for the eighth proposal were as follows. 2,045,599 shares of common stock were voted in favor of the proposal. 4,352 shares of common stock were voted against the proposal, and 541 shares of common stock were abstained from voting.
The report of the Inspector of Election indicates that the eighth and final proposal has been approved. Thank you, John. I will now hand it back to Jeremy to move on to a brief question and answer period.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, John. At the moment, what we're going to do is address the questions that came in earlier, both through the Slack channel and into our IR email. I'm actually going to go straight to the one that I believe anybody listening to this recording later or reading the transcript would be wondering about, is when you put out what is good news, there is no way to try to paint our quarterly numbers in any other way. When you put that news out and you trade 10 times your average volume on a day like today, and it's mostly sell-side pressure, what you're seeing is fast money, someone who was inside this company for a long time, using the opportunity to get out. They have no interest in the future. And in my opinion, it is not indicative or reflect what the actual intrinsic value of the company is. Now, of course, the actual value of a company, many argue, is where you can buy and sell its stock. But that is not true if it is not an apples to apples comparison for each and every other individual. And in this case, many buyers are hampered, many sellers are forced, and many sellers who have been with us a long time have not been able to fathom staying with the company through this next phase. But I do want to say that I don't think it's a huge problem. I think that it is a temporary event, and that eventually that fast money comes out of our company. And that will be explained further as we continue to update the market on the strengthening of our balance sheet as we have done. The second thing that I think causes selling is what I think of more as fake news. It's fake news that we're doing a reverse split. That's not true. We had a vote that allows us a reverse split. The last reverse split is the single reason why the company still exists. Otherwise, there would be no chance of upside, and we would be on the expert markets. The reverse split that was voted on in this particular shareholder meeting is in the event of an emergency. I have something that I can pull to save the value before it gets destroyed. And in today's case, I think that quite a bit of people, thought to themselves, He's getting ready to reverse the stock again. Let me remind everybody who listens to this in its recording format. I never shied away from telling everybody that we were going to reverse. When we were going to reverse, I came out long in advance ahead of it, and I took a lot of shit for it. I don't mind. In the end, I'm always going to be transparent and honest. The reverse split and the increase in shares is an insurance policy for you, the investor. Now, that may not work for every investor. Some investors might say, I don't ever want you doing a reverse split again. And for those investors, I say, I agree with you. But if you sell based on that down here, then you're making a mistake, because I am not reverse splitting the stock. Why would I reverse split the stock? There's only 4 million shares issued and outstanding and 1.5 billion shares in the authorized. I have no reason to reverse split. And so that's just letting the mob get angry and throw things out there. Let's move on to the next question, which I don't think has much to do with the stock trading today and all the shares being sold. Algos and market makers. And that's the conversation that I find more interesting, because there is no market maker that has an interest in seeing our stock go up. And what's really interesting is it is not because there's a single individual that wants that or doesn't want it. It is because the algo, looking at the data, deciding on whether to offer stock to a buyer to fill as many shares as it can. That algo is not there to keep the market efficient. It is there to profit at the cost of retail investors and make money for 2 or 3 market-making firms and electronic exchanges. It is Flash Boys on speed. Next question I got was company's valuation. What is the realistic valuation of this company? Vocal, I think, is worth, like the Vocal platform, I think is worth about $50 million in this current market environment, as compared to many of its peers in the private market, which are worth multiples of hundreds of millions. I think the OG collection is worth somewhere between 10 to 15 million, depending on how you mine the data. We've had a lot of great success with OG over the last couple of weeks as we released the Centerfold book, which is a walk through the entire collection with augmented reality. And so I'm quite pleased with that. And I would say that combining those two assets, which Created owns approximately 60% of both of those companies, 2/3 of both of those companies, I would argue 50, 65 million. I would say that Created's ownership is about $35 to $40 million on what should be an NAV basis. If we were allowed on it, which now we can on a non-GAAP basis, mark our assets to what they're really worth by getting them valued properly. Vocal is worth what I say, what I'm telling you, I think it's worth, in my opinion. Next question is a toss-up. Someone asked me, is John Tobacco still involved? And the answer is, John Tobacco is a dear old friend. He works with me on special projects, particularly when I'm looking into the operational systems revolving around the back office, stock loan, dividend creation. He's a guru at that, and I always look to him to help advise me when I'm looking to do those kind of transactions. Long-term investment and patience. We keep hearing long-term investment. Can you specify how much longer it will take to get back to its real value? No, I cannot specify that. I don't know. Warren Buffett, maybe he's someone you should read about relative to how he picks long-term value. and how companies like his were buying Apple when it was trading on the pink sheets in the 1980s. Next question. Profitability and business strategy. Profitability and business strategy, I think we've gone through and you can go to the Created website and download all sorts of presentations. But I think the strategy right now, which I would like to relay, is about getting immediately, as today we filed our legal letter with the OTC. So we'll hopefully within the next few days gain back our status as a current reporting pink sheet company, which will be followed by the beginning of our audit. The audit will take 90 days. That's just what happens when you fire your previous auditor for incompetence and you hire a new one to finish the process. Future OG collection and dividends, can't focus on that until I get the audit for the company done. Next couple of questions had to do with numbers, but my recommendation again is to look in today's announcement and in today's press release, and to look up our Q online at the OTC, and you'll be able to get all these details that people were asking me specifically about. And with that said, we're not going to be able to get to any more questions, but I really want to thank everybody for the 30 minutes and for the meeting and the time. And now I'll hand it back to you, Chelsea, to close out the meeting.
Thanks. That concludes today's meeting agenda. If there is no further business, this meeting is hereby adjourned. Once again, thank you all for your support and participation in today's proceedings, and have a great day.